This week on ANN, advocating for peace in the Central African Republic.
A record-breaking show of support for religious liberty in Mexico.
And Adventist young people spread a message of compassion.
These stories and more coming up.
This is ANN, a service of the Seventh-day Adventist World Church. Thank you so much for joining us this week.
First in the news, mass lootings in the capital of the Central African Republic have not affected Adventist church operations there, but locals say the ongoing civil war in the country is taking its toll on some church employees. In recent months, a mission worker was beaten and a pastor was arrested by rebel soldiers in a case of mistaken identity. Local church leaders are urging caution as members go about their daily lives. They advised church members to go straight home after worship services on a recent Saturday when a rebel army moved into the city. The coup is the latest power transition in a country plagued by political unrest. Still, Adventists continue to advocate for reconciliation. Earlier this month, they organised a march for peace that drew hundreds of supporters.
Religious liberty experts say they're grateful for recent gains in freedom of belief in southern Mexico. The region is emerging from years of intolerance. As recently as a decade ago, Protestants in the region still faced persecution from supporters of the region's dominant Catholic faith. But 2 years ago, government officials in Chiapas passed legislation to begin protecting freedom of belief. Since then, the movement has gained more supporters. This week, a festival of religious freedom drew more than 25,000 people to a stadium in Chiapas. The event was the largest celebration of religious liberty in that region.
Thousands of Adventist young people and supporters marched across the Brooklyn Bridge last week calling for compassion and an end to violence. The march was part of a Compassion Weekend sponsored by the Adventist Church in the U.S. state of New York. The public event helped raise awareness of the church and its values ahead of NY13, an outreach plan to introduce New Yorkers to the Adventist message of hope. Local government officials were on hand to help get out the message of compassion. Brooklyn native and congressional representative Yvette Clarke said at a press conference that conflict should be solved through love and compassion, not violence. Adventist youth leaders in the region say they hope the movement spreads across the U.S. Northeast and eventually worldwide.
Adventist leaders are looking for ways to make health and spiritual outreach a more comprehensive ministry. They say this philosophical approach to health ministry gets back to the roots of the Adventist Church, and it comes during a year when Adventists are reflecting on the denomination's formation 150 years ago. At a recent summit at World Church headquarters, health and ministerial leaders discussed goals and outlined ways to integrate their ministry. One idea would see the church offer a combined Masters of Divinity and Masters of Public Health degree. Another approach calls for a modern adaptation of church co-founder Ellen White's book, Ministry of Healing. Church leaders say the goal is to follow Christ's model of outreach, meeting physical needs before spiritual ones.
Thousands of students attending Adventist schools and universities across Inter-America skipped a day of classwork recently to spend time in prayer and Bible study. The annual event is one way church leaders promote daily prayer life on campuses throughout the region. They say enthusiasm is growing for the day of prayer, with students finding creative ways to participate. This year, students used music, drama, poetry and social media to focus on prayer. The efforts reflect the World Church's current emphasis on prayer and Bible study through initiatives like Revived by His Word and 777. The 777 prayer initiative invites Adventists worldwide to pray 7 days a week at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m.
Business students at the Adventist Church's Valley View University in Ghana have won this year's Regional Global Management Challenge. The contest is the world's largest business management competition and currently involves students from 40 countries worldwide. Each team runs a virtual company and aims to get the highest share price on a simulated stock exchange. The team from Valley View will represent Ghana at the international final of the Global Management Challenge in Romania later this month.
And finally in the news this week, an Adventist League of Baseball teams in Cuba is drawing community members to games and to church. The program first began with young Adventists who wanted to play baseball in a Christian environment. But community members were also interested, and church leaders say the League is now a unique outreach opportunity. League organisers pray before games, ban profanity and bad sportsmanship, and encourage players to attend morning and evening worship. Last year, 100 community members joined the Adventist Church after playing or attending the games. Local church leaders say even government officials are now welcoming the positive influence the program has had on the community. You can read the whole story in this month's issue of Adventist World magazine.
And speaking of Adventist World, we have a preview of the April issue coming up.
I was once in the town of Ljubljana in Slovenia. Across the river was a bridge where romantics from all over the world attached love padlocks with their names written on. These locks were locked and the keys thrown away to signify their eternal love for one another. Padlocks rust, people change, relationships end, but Jesus' love is everlasting.
As I was reading through The Great Hope, this phrase caught my attention. God looks with pitying tenderness upon these souls, educated as they are in a faith that is delusive and unsatisfying. He will cause rays of light to penetrate the dense darkness that surrounds them. He will reveal to them the truth as it is in Jesus, and many will yet take their position with His people. This brings me hope because it shows me God's great unfailing love for everyone. It doesn't matter who we are or how we were raised, what religion we were brought up in. God will find a way to show us the truth, to show us the gospel in Jesus, to bring us to His kingdom. He will find a way to pull us out of whatever darkness we are in and show us light. And this brings me such joy and such hope.
Creativity is God's gift to a scientist. It's a scientist's way to look into the unknown and then try to figure a solution to a problem. It's very different than creativity in arts, which is just spontaneous. Still a gift from God, whereas science is a series of problems, and the creativity relating to science has to do with solving those problems.
14 young adults from around the world are coming together in one city. Their mission? Rolling up their sleeves and hitting the streets to help others wherever and whenever they are needed. Follow these urban missionaries as they share their love and their time with people in need. Join them as they create lifelong friendships and share God's love this year in New York City. 1 year in mission, NY13.
Welcome back. This month's issue of Adventist World explores how creation points more clearly to a creator than any theory or argument could. We asked Gerald Klingbeil for a preview.
Creation and evolution are red-button issues all over the world, including also Adventist churches. We are bombarded daily by theories and hypotheses and arguments and counter-arguments. This month's cover story, Creation on Display, attempts a different approach. It showcases the wonders of creation and tells the story of how Adventist institutions and individuals around the world share the Creator's genius with people around them. Come with us to the Byolse-Kotol Science Center in Korea that draws more than 100,000 visitors a year and highlights God's handiwork in space and up closer in nature. What about the Origins exhibit at Southern Adventist University that introduces students and visitors to the beauty and intricate design of a cell, or the big questions of the creation-evolution debate in the halls of the biology department building? If you don't want to travel to Collegedale in Tennessee, here is another option. Look over the shoulders of the Martinez family in Panama, who run Natur Panama, a conservation and ecotourism business, and share the beauty and diversity of creation with thousands of visitors every year. But there is more in this month's copy of Adventist World. Learn to face the roaring lion with Stefan Höschle in his Fundamental Belief article on growing in Christ. Or listen carefully to Mary Alice White sharing important insights from the well-known biblical story of Saul's call on the way to Damascus. Finally, read Bill Nott's helpful piece introducing a new series about Adventist history called The Adventist Story. There is more, but I imagine by now you are ready to pick up your printed copy of Adventist World or visit us online or on Facebook. We always love to spend time with you.
Adventist church pioneer Ellen White is the most translated American author in history. This week, Chantel Klingbeil has advice on approaching what can seem like an overwhelming number of books and articles.
Have you read any good books lately? How about reading something from the most translated woman writer in the entire history of literature, and the most translated American author of either gender? Although Ellen White lived most of her life during the 19th century, her writings are still making a revolutionary impact on millions of people around the world. As a Seventh-day Adventist, I believe that Mrs. White was more than a gifted writer. She was appointed by God as a special messenger to draw the world's attention to the Bible and help prepare people for Christ's second coming. During her lifetime, Ellen White wrote more than 5,000 periodical articles and 40 books. But today, including compilations that may draw from her 50,000 pages of manuscript, you have more than 100 titles to choose from. Her writings cover a broad range of subjects, including religion, education, social relationships, evangelism, prophecy, publishing, nutrition, and lifestyle management. So there's definitely something there for you. Perhaps you've never heard of Ellen White, or perhaps you've only heard what others have said about her. Either way, I would love you to experience her writings for yourself. Why not begin with my personal favorite, which is a masterpiece on successful Christian living, Steps to Christ. By the way, this one's been published in more than 165 languages. It's a quick, powerful read. Visit us at egwritings.org to access our free online books and writings. You'll also find links to our Android, iPhone, and iPad apps. Enjoy your Ellen White read.
Now let's find out what our Facebook and Twitter followers were talking about this week. Megan Bronner has a roundup of Adventist social media highlights.
Here's your social media news in 90 seconds or less. Want to share the Pray for Togo campaign with your non-English speaking friends? Go to the Adventist Church's Vimeo page and share our short Pray for Togo videos on all your social networks. Available in Spanish, Portuguese, French, and Tagalog. The Adventist Church is on Instagram, and they are kicking off a virtual tour of the World Church headquarters this weekend. Check back to see what hidden gem they feature each week, and tweet tour stop requests to the Adventist Church account using the hashtag AdventistHQ. Adventist Risk Management advertised a free webinar for safety officers on its Facebook page. You can learn more about the April 10 class on the official event page. The Adventist-run Sunscreen Film Festival announced that they will be exclusively screening the premiere of The Adventist 2, a documentary about the Seventh-day Adventist World Church by award-winning filmmaker Martin Doblmeier. The April 4 to 6 festival will be the first public screening of the sequel. The first film aired on public television in 2010. This week's breaking social media headline, Skype announced that users are spending 2 billion minutes a day using their internet calling and chat service. In case you were wondering, in that amount of time, you could fly around the world non-stop nearly 500,000 times. And your social media tip of the week? Try out the video sharing apps Vine and Funky. Both allow you to record 30 seconds of video and post these bite-sized clips to Twitter and Facebook. Funky allows you to record your own voiceover and apply Instagram-like filters to your video clips. And that's been your social media news in 90 seconds or less.
A translation of the Bible published in 1611 is still impacting Christians today, and a new book edited by Nicholas Saddlemeyer explains why. Pacific Press Publishing Association sent this month's A&N Book Review.
I recently read The Book That Changed the World, the story of the King James Version, and I learned a lot about the history of this life-changing book we often take for granted. The Book That Changed the World traces the journey of the origins and the making of the King James Bible. It also shows the influence of the King James Version on Ellen White and the Adventist faith. My favorite part of the book was the section that talked about the different Bible translations and the translators that poured their heart and soul into translating them. The Book That Changed the World will encourage readers to read the Bible and will help them to see it in a new light. The Bible is God's message. A translation is a vehicle in which people can understand that message. The Bible changed the world in the 17th century, and more than 400 years later, it is still changing our world.
In the New Testament, Jesus demonstrates the importance of inclusiveness and equality time and again. Children attending Adventist Sabbath schools worldwide are learning these same lessons through the church's GraceLink curriculum. Denora Rivera explains.
Jesus presented his followers with some big life-changing ideas, and some of them took a long time to sink in. The Greek woman had been born in Phoenicia. She was most definitely not Jewish, and yet she had the audacity to approach Jesus to talk to him, ask him for a favor, and even bother him. Her little daughter had an evil spirit. It was ruining their lives. She had heard he could get rid of it, so she fell at his feet and begged for help. Jesus took this opportunity to teach those who were watching. He told the woman it wasn't right to give the children's bread to the dogs. The people there would have that attitude, and then the woman surprised them with her reply, "But the dogs get the crumbs." That was a great answer, and Jesus laughed. "You may go, the daughter is healed." And the people watching had one more big idea to marvel at. Gentiles worthy? Foreigners equal? Women clever? Jesus kept teaching this idea. The Samaritan woman at the well, Peter's dream about unclean animals. He's still working with us today to rethink our attitudes. In the GraceLink lessons, children are immersed in this big idea. They hear stories of inclusiveness. They see illustrations reflecting the richness of international diversity. All aspects, from the activities through the artwork, have been developed with this purpose in mind. Every week, in Adventist Sabbath schools around the world, GraceLink is being used to open minds and hearts to Jesus in his big ideas. Through the faithful ministry of teachers and parents, all children are made to feel welcome, loved, and important.
Still ahead on A&N, a literature evangelist makes a surprising connection.
But up next, new ways to share God's love with children.
Well, the book, The Great Controversy, has been my favorite book for many years. In fact, it has changed my life. It has helped me understand that the whole world is under God's control. And then it has helped me to have a confidence in God's guidance in my life.
When I go to sleep, I pray for Jesus to help me not to have bad dreams. Pray for my grandparents but because he is in cancer right now. I pray. I don't want to get sick anymore. I pray for my family. Please pray 7 in the morning, 7 in the evening, and 7 days a week.
Welcome back. As the Adventist Church focuses on outreach to big cities, children's ministry leaders are learning to adapt their message to a more urban environment.
With the majority of the world population living in urban areas, the Seventh-day Adventist Church is working hard to reach the cities. There are millions and thousands of children living in the cities, and Jesus wants us to minister to them and to tell them of His love. So how can we reach these children? Some effective and appealing programs that we can organize to reach children, such as vacation Bible schools, craft weekends, puppet shows, children's church, or a health expo. Through these programs, the children are introduced to the love of Jesus. They learn skills such as, and they can participate in all the different activities and learning to serve in the community. We can also build relationships with many of the parents who can be invited later on to either other programs that we find helpful for them. Ministering to those children who need our love, food, care, protection, and medicine is another way to reach them in the cities. We may conduct such similar programs in the orphanages and children's homes to share with them the love of Jesus. In fact, this is the most susceptible age when children accept Jesus as their forever friend. So we have lots of work to do in the cities.
Even if you don't have a future in web building or software design, some basic programming knowledge can expand your skill set and your perspective. John Beckett explains on this week's Tech Corner.
Knowing how to use technology is now key to daily life and work. However, using technology is very different from knowing how to build it. Just like knowing how to drive a car doesn't mean you know how to work on one. Building and maintaining technical things like websites and software can be a great career, and your skills may also be helpful as the church continues to use technology for mission. If you or your child would like to learn about how to program software, a great self-paced option is an interactive online course. These types of courses are fun and give you instant feedback. It's also a good place to start because most of them will try to teach you good habits and methods. If this sounds interesting, head to code.org where you can choose from a variety of courses about building web applications and even mobile apps. There are lots of free choices and many topics are covered very well. I suggest starting with a course from Code Academy about HTML and CSS, followed by a programming language like Ruby or PHP. Even if you never hope to be an application developer or website builder, learning about programming is a great way to expand your knowledge of how computers think, while at the same time, perhaps even changing the way you analyze other areas of your life. To get started, visit code.org.
When a literature evangelist knocked on the last door of a Brooklyn, New York neighborhood, he just wanted to finish his route and go home for the night. But God had other plans. Howard Feigow has the story of this month's feature from Publishing Ministries.
Lord, I'm tired. This will be my last door. Then I'm going home. Desmond Hay whispered those words as he walked down the hallway of an apartment building in Brooklyn, New York. It was cold, wintry evening, and he was finding it difficult to reach people. Desmond's plea must have reached heaven, because when he knocked on the last door, the woman who answered smiled and asked how she could help. She was delighted with Desmond's presentation, and she purchased all the books. Desmond offered to enroll her in Bible studies, and she accepted, expressing her desire to learn more about Jesus. They prayed together and parted. Several months later, Desmond received a call from that woman. She was reading the Great Controversy and felt blessed by the Bible studies. She was planning to get married, and she wanted Desmond to be a part of that celebration. Several weeks later, she was married in a beautiful service. They parted on a happy note, not knowing whether they would ever meet again. But months later, when Desmond was presenting a revival series in Brooklyn, he made an appeal for those desiring to surrender their hearts to Jesus. To Desmond's surprise, he saw the woman and her husband coming down the aisles. They surrendered their hearts to Christ and were baptized at the end of the series. Praise God for what took place that night in that apartment building. A woman who would be led to Jesus was waiting behind the last door.
Now let's turn to Benjamin Baker for a look at Adventist history. This week, an Arminian professor risks everything for his faith.
Welcome to This Week in Adventist History. It was during this week in 1921 that Daron Chirakian was last heard from in a letter penned from a dungeon in Iconium. Years earlier, Daron Chirakian had been famous in his native Armenia, holding professorships at the most prestigious universities in Istanbul, authoring best-selling books, and highly celebrated as an astronomer and psychologist. An outspoken atheist, he was known to scoff at all things religious until a fellow professor gave Adventist books to him. Chirakian read himself into Adventism, quitting his career to join the ministry, his friends and family, including his wife, disowning him. The years that followed were difficult for Chirakian, marked by imprisonment for his faith, while his country, Europe, and the larger world were embroiled in World War I, the bloodiest conflict in history up to that point. Chirakian nevertheless won scores of souls to Christ throughout Asia Minor. Known as a man of exceptional spirituality, he spent entire nights in prayer and was said to be surrounded by a holy atmosphere. Witnesses attest that on one occasion he resurrected a missionary from the dead. Daron Chirakian's storied life ended in the same manner it did for some 1.5 million of his fellow countrymen when he was killed in the Armenian genocide in 1921. And that was This Week in Adventist History.
Thanks for watching ANN. Join us next week for more news from the headquarters of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
In the meantime, follow us on Twitter. You can connect with other Adventists worldwide and join our weekly social media conversations. Just search for Adventist News on twitter.com.
Our good news for this week comes from the New Testament book of Romans. The passage says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what is God's will, His good, pleasing, and perfect will."
That's our program for this week, and remember, you can always visit news.adventist.org for daily news and videos. Until next time, God bless.
Take care.